Hello, you lot. Welcome back. I say welcome back. I'm the only one that's been away. Hopefully, none of you have been here for the last 3 weeks because I haven't. So you've been watching the blank screen. Sorry about that. Anyway, we're back. Yay. For those of you wondering about my lack of sleep, clearly, handy hint: don't try and move house with jet lag. This place here hasn't yet moved, which is why it looks the same. But wow. So yeah, on very little sleep, we're going to spend the next hour together. Isn't that fun? Editing your pictures. But today, specifically, we're going to also be opening up the Capture One beta, and we're going to look at some of the functions that are brought into the next version, next larger version, the next major release, as it were. We'll talk about what that means in a bit. But hopefully we'll make the session interactive. Hopefully we can do a bit of show and tell, bit of explore, bit of breaking stuff, because that's always fun, yeah. And we'll hopefully be able to get you guys a bit prepared for what's coming down the line, which is going to be quite fun. So with that said, let's just get some ground rules done for my benefit more than anyone else's. Number one, make this interactive. So if you are online live, please do put in the chat any questions, any concerns or whatever. We may not get to all of them because sometimes I miss them. Number two, bear in mind I'm about 5 or 6 seconds in the future from you, which means by the time you type a comment, there's a lag before I see it in terms of relevance to what's on the screen. It's not me ignoring you. It's just called latency, which is the way that live streaming works. But I am listening. I am reading. It's just sometimes we're a little bit busy doing some editing, right? Number three, if you want your images to be used in this session, please use that tool. So go to paulreeferlive.wetransfer.com. You can upload your file. Please include your name. Your email address is no good as your name. I don't understand your name if you are funkyyazywaz@hotmail.com. Need to know your name. We need to know your name, otherwise we won't include your picture. Because it's weird to not be able to relate to the person that's taken the picture. But upload your raw file if you wish. Upload any edits that you've done, and hopefully it'll note about what you're looking for. So is it there's a problem? Is it you've tried to do something? Is it you want a different view on it? Up to you. But please send them in, and we'll try and get through as many as we can. Isn't that fun? For those of you that are on the, however you deem it, evilness or wonderfulness of Facebook and its totalitarian control of the world, you can access that group there. That group allows you to chat away in between these sessions, and also in there is this month's competition, obviously. So for those of you that don't know what that is, well, you're going to have to find out that way, or wait until the next live when we announce the winner for this month's competition. There we go. For those of you that are looking for something slightly different as lives, I'm going to sort of tease this one again. So this is getting nearer. Not yet. It's getting nearer. Mr. Grover from Capture One and I, and actually some others, are going to be doing some live broadcasts, live Capture One stuff over a period of a few days. That will be somewhere funky, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for those. So keep an eye out on all those. Right. Cool. That was it, wasn't it? It's the... that's our emergency exits done. We're all good. We're good to go. Right, let's get in. Version today. How exciting. Isn't it nice being on a beta that we can actually talk about? Hooray. Because betas have been going on for ages, and alphas and whatever else with Capture One. Historically, Capture One used to keep them under an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, which meant that no one could talk about them or their existence. A little bit frustrating. Lots of companies do it. We do it with certain contracts for commercial clients and stuff. But as of late and more recently, obviously it's become a lot more public. They've been getting a lot more feedback, which is great. And it means that people get to play with stuff ahead of time. The key thing being it's ahead of time. In other words, this software that we're using today is not production ready. Beta 1, not production ready. Beta 2, not production ready. Beta 3, not production ready. It's production ready, in their view, when it goes out as a release. And that release date has not yet been finalised out into the public. So all these people guessing about, is it going to be October the 14th? Is it going to be the 23rd? Is it going to whatever? Stop it. You're wasting your time. It'll go out when they're ready. It'll go out when they're happy that the version that is being tested out there in the wild is good enough and ready for production use. In the meantime, what that means is, if you are using the beta, that version there, 16.7 point, I think it's 0. What does it say, 34 or something like that we're up to at the moment. Do not use it on production systems for two reasons. Number one, you're branching off your version of catalog and image engine, which mean, and that doesn't necessarily mean it stays that branch for production. They might do a different version, which means any catalogs you create in the beta could end up dead-ended because they won't be upgradable to the production. Could be. The second is things break in beta. Ooh, interesting fact, beta. So I did have to double check this. It's not beta under any circumstances. Modern Greek, turns out it's not even a B, it's a V. It should be pronounced vita. There you go, you learn something new every day. At best, ancient Greek and with the B involved, it could be beta, but that's an anglicized version of it. What it's definitely not is beta. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that movement. Anyway, playing with a beta version of software is playing with test software, in the same way that you would not strap your kids into the car on a test version of a whatever, Tesla, BMW, whatever, especially if they said, look, this isn't production ready. Do not trust a beta or an alpha or whatever with your live production work. Please don't be that person that has to send the message in saying, is there any way of rescuing this? There may be. You may be able to unwind, but the reality is you're playing with fire. So if you are going to play with the beta, you can go into your account in capture1.com. You can download the version. So you'll see an element that says Capture One Beta. You have to sign up for the program. It will give you a special key. The process for it is you download it and it will install a second version of Capture One. Now, what's interesting in this version, they actually now warn you. It's quite nice. Beforehand, you just had to know this, but the latest version of the beta, when it loads up, it'll actually say to you, do you want to really upgrade your current catalog, or do you want to maybe start a new one because this is test software? Great move. I've appreciated it because it's taken some questions away from people. But please do set up a test environment, a test catalog. Bring in the same images, fine, but do treat it in the way that it's intended, which is it could go wrong. That's the whole point of a beta program. There we go. Lecture over. But it's serious. Don't be that person. Right, what is in this version? So, key thing here. This is a major or a point release. So a major point release is in it's going to 16.7. What does that mean for licensing? It means that if you're on a subscription, you can obviously carry on using your version because you pay every month or every year for the right to be on the very latest version. Well done you. Yay. If you've bought a perpetual license, it is not possible for you to be on 16.7 without paying to upgrade, if you already own one now. If you were to buy into version 16.7, then you get 16.7, 0.71, 0.72, 0.73, 0.74, until 16.8 or 17 or whatever. So if you've bought in at the moment up to 16.6, any of the previous numbers to that, you will not automatically get 16.7. You will need to upgrade your license, and that's a choice that you've made as being a perpetual license owner. So if you're a subscriber, you get it automatically. If you're a perpetual license owner, you now need to choose whether the features are valuable enough for you to warrant doing the upgrade. And that's the beauty of owning a perpetual license. You don't have to. No one has to upgrade. It's your choice. So there we go. Let's get into Capture One, and we're going to talk about exactly those things on that screen. Combining masks. So we've been hinting at this for a little while. It's been in the works for a long time. I'm going to run through in this session why it's different to what we could have always done, because I think people are confusing. You could always do stuff like this, and actually, without realizing it, you've all been using intersecting masks for years. And we'll talk about what that means. But you've all been doing it for years. You just haven't noticed it. But the new functions in there give us some ability to keep the variable nature of certain masks going forward, as well as things like subject detection, AI masks, and so on, without having to rasterize. And we'll talk about what that means in a bit. They've enhanced the retouch function. So the retouch was launched earlier this year. big thing if you're shooting people. It does a great job on faces and so on. They've expanded that because it turns out that humans don't just have a face, they also have a neck. Well, some do. A little bit left. So, but the point being, it was looking a little bit weird. You had blemish reduction on the face, and then the neck didn't have it. So they've included that. They've included some enhancements to eyes and also to teeth. For those of you that produce images for other people to check through and select, contact sheets is in there. We'll talk about that in a second. Clothes masking has been added. So for when you're doing your people cutouts, and we'll cover that quickly in a second as well. For those of you that are very geeky, HSL readouts, for those of you that are just interested in seeing what hue saturation and lightness or luminance, whichever, is, we'll cover that in a second. And for those of us that shoot with big cameras, so this is actually quite key for me. The second I create an image in Photoshop, so I have a phase 1 file, an IIQ file, it gets transformed into a TIFF. Typically on one layer it's about 700 meg. If I have 3 layers in Photoshop, I'm now above the 2 gig limit. So Photoshop has a mechanism for that called PSB. Photoshop big files. Rather than PSD, Photoshop document, I think is what it is. Capture One now supports PSB, which is great. Only supports them up to, from memory, 765 megapixels, which is the same limit for other things. But that's a pretty nice move forward for those of us that deal with larger files all the time. So that's the pack of goodies. As I say, you all need to make the decision on whether or not they're worth it to you, to your workflow, and the value that you would place on them. But if you're on a subscription, you're going to get all those anyway the second it's launched. If you're not, life's about choices. Capture One. Ta-da! Right, so as you will notice, most of the interface within Capture One is pretty similar. I'm going to run through some of the changes, but pretty much you're not going to be lost when you go into Capture One. But there is some very distinctive ways of working with layers, which are going to be very new to people. So just covering some of the questions in there. So Charles, would I consider On One Photo Raw as a viable alternative pixel level editor to Photoshop? No. It does some stuff, but it's not really designed for that. I would say you're probably better, if you're looking for a pixel editor, you're probably better off pairing with Affinity. I have heard things about Affinity. It's funny, isn't it? Everyone's evil because they're moving to subscription. We love Affinity and Serif because they're not subscription. I've heard rumors. Apparently they go into subscription. Isn't it funny, all the software companies working out they need constant revenue, not just one-off? Anyway, I would personally look at pairing Capture One with something like Affinity. There are others as well, but Photo Raw does a great job at certain things. It's not got the depth of some of the other pixel editors in certain functions. So maybe if it suits your needs, great, but I'd just do a full check first. Where are we? Paula, for me, I would say the news layers functionality is the biggest thing in Capture One in years. Interesting. Okay, we'll see. And Danny, big camera being chunky phase ones, even older ones, so they count. They do. What I'm referring to more is the file size, but yeah, I mean, if you're packing in 10 kilos of a camera in your bag, that's a big camera. It was good. Right. So we have in front of us a picture. Now, first off, we are going to cover the other little functions before we go into the layers thing, because they're things that we're not necessarily going to cover in this session, but they are all decent features. So number one are readouts. So in Capture One, for a long time, you're used to seeing these numbers up here. They give us red, green, blue, and luminosity, luminance. In other words, how bright that pixel is on average overall, combining the red, green, and blue. If you go to the View menu and go to Readout Format, you could change that to Lab, and you can change that into different lab colors. Great. Different lab profiles. Now you have HSL. Why does HSL sound like an insurance company or something like that, or one of those like weird cremation plans or something? Anyway, weird. HSL. So hue, saturation, and luminance, lightness, whichever way you want to flow with that. So hue based on our little rainbows. So if I were to pull up in our color tab, our wonderful little color editor, because I've hidden that. It's annoying, isn't it? Let's go into my color balance. So here is our hue. So in other words, how many degrees around a circle of color, and it's reading out here at 216, 217 degrees. Saturation, which if you think about it in terms of how far from the center, so not saturated through to fully saturated, and then its lightness. Great. Easy, right? How useful that is to us, I don't know. Most people are used to RGBL, but if you are into your HSL setup, it's a nice little add-on if you choose to have it. Okay. Next up, people masking. You now have under people masking this function here of clothes. Not going to show it here. There are other sessions that you will see, especially Mr. Grover's for Capture One. But you get the idea that instead of just worrying about face skin, body skin, hands, blah, 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 it's now also got the ability to include clothes in the people mask. Now, previously, you could always go to subject, of course. You could do the subject mask, and it would 9 times out of 10 get you a person. But this way, it's actually separated out, because the key thing is under here, we can click on separate masks, and it will give me a mask for every single one of those different items that I check. So I can separate out the clothes from the rest of the person. Bit more difficult to do when you're just using the subject mask there. Great. So that one's quite easy, right? Quite nice. PSB support, pretty simple. If we were to go to export, I now have a function in here, or format in here, of PSB, and I can choose to be 16-bit. I can choose my color space, which I would personally stick with Adobe RGB. This was probably going to be fixed, because there's no point in doing a big file export if you're going to reduce it down. But yes, PSB format is now in here, and you can round trip. That's kind of nice. So lots of fun stuff. The support for PSB natively is more useful than you realize. Retouch editions. So under the Retouch tab, which was introduced earlier this year, you now have the ability in here to tick and say, I want to include the neck area. I want to include the neck area on skin evening as well as blemishes. So there's a slight difference in the way that it does that. And under your eyes, we can now change the impact. So effectively, if you've got two, what was happening, I think, just to be clear, I think this sclera word, which I don't like, pronounced weird to me, but the whites of your eyes, if you were to ramp this up, it would make them sort of glow a little bit if you did it too much. But the problem is, quite often with lighting, you've got one eye that's lighter than the other in terms of the fall off. So now you've got the ability to separate out with an offset how much of an impact the retouching of eyes has on the front versus, or the lighter versus darker eye, depending on which one's front. So it's a small thing, but it does sort of work. It does make a difference. So yes, we've got teeth retouching, lovely. All the other stuff that you had before, but you can see now actually this I think if you go back to many lives ago, we talked about this, that this menu will build, right? It's starting to build, strangely. Now I'm looking forward to the day that this builds with non-people stuff. It may be a different tab, but the point being, the technology that's able to identify elements that are known, eyes, teeth, neck, whatever, could be applied to landscape, could be applied to architecture, could be applied to product, whatever. And I'd be interested to see if this can be built out more in a different direction than just humans. But anyway, we'll see. So that's the retouch editions. Contact sheets. So there's a fun one, isn't there? Let's go. I'm going to go into my archive of all the old images that are all offline from previous lives. That's fun, isn't it? Let's collect all of these as a selection. Good. And we are going to export to contact sheet. Lost it there for a second. Now, there are some things in this that I'm not quite sure are ready yet, or they're going to need tweaking, but let's go into it. So here is our contact sheet builder. You will see lots of images in there. I can choose how many I want wide. So let's say 6 wide. No, that's too many. Let's go 3 wide by 6 high. There's my contact sheet. Great. I can increase the spacing. So let's go 15 and 15, and I can add a nice margin in there. In fact, let's put a margin of, let's say, 25. Okay. And I can export that contact sheet as a JPEG or as a PDF. I can also change the background. I can include the names of my files. So for passing this to people, for them to review images or whatever, great stuff. This is a nice addition. I know it's something that people have asked from previous or from other software. You know, why can't we produce it in here? There are scripts that have been written. There are ways of doing it through albums and stuff like that, but this is now native within Capture One to do it. Where it's lacking, in my opinion, it's just opinion, not fact, but in my view, while it is lovely that I can choose a pink background if I so wish, what is less lovely is I can't change this here from pixels within here. And I would argue that a contact sheet is typically going to be for either print or viewing as a page. So, for example, an A4 piece of paper. Well, what do I do that as? Should I do a 2100 by 2970, for example? That's an A4 sheet now. The top and bottom need to have a margin. So let's talk about the margins. 25 watt. I don't know, 25 watts. Are they 25 guinea pigs? Are they 25 pixels? Are they 25 things? Don't know. Same with the spacing, 15 of what? So to me, this isn't quite there yet. Maybe it will release like this. Maybe it needs some tweaks later on. Maybe size doesn't matter to other people. You can lock your size in there. But I would be in a place of, and actually it locks the aspect ratio most importantly. So if I want a higher resolution version, I can go 5000 pixels, and that gives me the equivalent of A4. But if I wanted, let's say, an A3 one, then I'd be going at, what am I doing? 4200 by, unlock it, by 2970. That gives me an A3 sheet. Then I've got this whole thing about spacing. So, well, what do I do? Dimensions, let's go 4 across, and spacing I can go 0, I guess, because there's no, it's not, and Capture One isn't a desktop publisher. Just bear that in mind. But to me, if this is going to be a really good contact sheet export, it needs a little bit more, just a tiny little bump of extra functionality. But we'll see. Who knows? This is just beta. Right. Let's talk about masks. So that's all the other stuff. That's the fun stuff done, right? Let's talk about masks. So, first thing. You've all been using intersecting masks this whole time. You just haven't noticed it. And funnily enough, you will notice it when you go into Capture One, because you will find the default that they set is an intersecting mask that you're all very familiar with. Let me show you. I'm going to create a radial mask over this skyline of New York, because I want to maybe darken down the bright bit. Don't know why I would, but maybe I do. Maybe increase some saturation. Lovely. Okay. So I've got a mask now here. But I don't want to darken the skyline. Problem. Well, we've always had this ability, right, beforehand, to add in a luma range. Now, luma range looks like it's missing, because it used to be there, right? It used to be next to where combined masks is. Now it's gone. Well, why would luma range go? Because it's a really useful tool. And the reason is because luma ranges were an intersecting mask. Think about the logic. So I'm going to go to combine masks. I'm going to move this across, by the way, just so you can see the menu, because unfortunately the menu comes a little bit off of my screen in my setup here, just my setup. And it means that you're not seeing, just do a bit more. I'm squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. There we go. You can now see it. Right. So I choose my operation, and the default, this is the key thing, the default that you have is intersect luma range, which is what you've always been doing. So, and that's set as default. So let me create a mask. Here's my luma range. Looks familiar, right? I want to remove all the dark parts of the city. So I'm going to say, no. I want to keep all that lot. There we go. Go up to there. Keep going. Come on. Oh, we start to lose the tower with that. We'll come back to that in a second. But let's maybe go up to, can't quite do it, but we'll get to there. Okay, good. We can play around with the edges and stuff like that. We can play around with the fall off so it's more brutal or less brutal and so on. But hit apply. This is an intersecting mask by definition. So what it means is I have a radial mask, but it only applies where my selection in my luma range also applies. That's an intersecting mask. The two statements have to be true. It's this overlap for it to be masked. In this case, it has to be dark in the luma range, and it has to be within the radial. So even though this area down here is very, very dark, because it's fell out of the radial, it's not masked. And actually, let's just go into our grayscale mask so you can see exactly what's happening. Great. But the problem, of course, was that I can't do that for anything other than a luma range. I can't intersect anything else. And also, while it's wonderful that I can go to my radial and I can move this around, so let's go to my radial mask, I can still move it, and you see the luma range is still kicking in. It doesn't help me when I want to get rid of this, for example, because when I want to get rid of this, let's do it. Actually, yeah, let's do it. I don't want this in there. I do want a bit more of the city, so I'm going to modify my luma range to include a little bit more darkness. Maybe to there. Apply. Okay, lovely. Now we're going to erase. Standard eraser, and I'm going to click on, so I'm on my radial mask. Click. Do I want to rasterize the mask? Yeah, I do. Because I want to delete it. Not a problem. So let's rasterize the mask. And let's rasterize down here. I'm not being very neat, don't worry. Not being that precious over it. Okay, so now I have a mask which has a luma range applied, lovely, and a radial mask applied, right? Wrong. I no longer have a radial mask because I've rasterized it. So let's imagine I now want to do the reverse and edit my radial mask. I cannot. It's no longer editable. If I start drawing, it deletes my first mask and now applies that radial to the bit that excluded through the luma range. That's a bit of a problem, right? And actually, just to be clear, this is almost the opposite. So if we're going to do this properly, in the way that I've just twigged when I'm looking on the screen, so if we're going to do this properly, which we will in a minute, we would actually do the other way around. So to do that very quickly, just to re-show you and reassure you, let's create a radial mask here, because I want the sky, not the buildings, remember. And then we're going to go combine masks, or what used to be add a luma range, create mask. And we're going to say I want everything apart from the buildings. Lovely. There we go. Hit apply. But I've now got another problem as well, which we may not have even noticed before. Here's my grayscale mask. I can obviously delete this stuff down here. Yep. So let's do that. And it's going to say, do you want to rasterize? Yes, I do. Okay. Lovely. But these lights match the luminosity of the background, so they're not part of the mask. That's a problem. So I can't intersect with something that's not definable by its brightness. Also, I now decide that this mask isn't feathered enough. I'm going to see a dark line. If I were to go into my exposure here and then just pull this down and maybe put some saturation up, bad news, I can see this line of where the mask was. I want to feather it some more. That's okay. It's a radial mask, right? Go to my radial mask. Oh, it's not editable. I've rasterized it, so it's fixed. So this is where the problem came for a long time about the ability to interact with different masks. And this is where it becomes really powerful as a result of being able to use intersecting masks. Because, let's do this one fully. I'm going to create a new radial mask, just like I said before. And that mask is going to be quite harsh, because I choose it to be. Okay. Then I'm going to, instead of using a lumen range or luminosity range, I'm going to say I'm going to choose an AI select. I could try subject. Do we try subject? Nah, let's do an AI select. And I'm going to say I want it to subtract from that mask. So there is my mask, my radial. It's created me a new AI select, effectively submask within this layer. These are nested layers now. It's quite fun. I And remember, each mask doesn't necessarily mean that you're adding a new layer. The layer is at the top level. So that's the layers we run out of, not the masks. I'm going to draw this over the city. And it starts to delete. Because I have said it's a subtract mask. You get this little cue here that tells you. So that's my city subtracted. Lovely. I'm going to use that word a lot. Right. Now I've got a problem because I've got the water. Don't want the water. Now, if I delete the water, we have a problem, right? Because it's rasterized, and then I'm stuck with my radial mask being basically fixed. So instead, let's combine another mask and say subtract again. But this time I'm going to use a, let's say, linear gradient, actually, because I can be a bit lazy here. Create the mask. And I'm just going to draw, oops, other way. This gradient here. Good. And because it's editable, I can move it up and down. So I can make it a nice harsh line. Perfect. All right, already we're in a good place because you can imagine what's now coming. If I turn my mask off, this layer here, so my radial gradient mask, which is the layer, just be clear, the mask isn't the layer, different thing. But this layer, I can now say, right, I want to pump up my saturation a little bit, not that much, just maybe there. Maybe I want to warm it a little bit, maybe add a little bit of tint, that would be quite nice, and pull down my exposure. Now that's done a really nice job here, but look at this horrible band. Well, the good news is these are all still editable. So I can go into my radial mask and I can make changes to my radial mask separately to everything else. If I decide I want a little bit of the water left in there, I can make changes to my linear gradient. So I could actually move this to include some of the water to also have a boost of saturation. I've got 3 completely independently variable, changeable masks that either subtract or add or intersect. And hopefully you're already familiar, as a result of me showing you that, with Intersect, because you've already been using it for LumaRange. If you've been watching this channel and learning from what we do in edits, you've already been doing it. And look at here. So, I made that decision that I wanted to go, include some of this in here with that mask. Well, it's turned the water a bit pink. Don't want to now. Well, that's okay, because I can still edit my gradient separately from all the other masks. And what's happening in the background is the mask is either adding or subtracting or intersecting. That's pretty good, right? And it sounds weird, but a lot of people have been focusing on the people bit, and I get it. The people bit is important. But on cities and on landscapes, this stuff is really, really handy. So let me show you a couple of other ones. Let's imagine here. This is a little bit overblown. I don't know why it's like that. Let's go to there. So I've got 2 images, slightly different exposures. Answer to Philip. No new panoramic photo tool planned for the new version. Nope, is the short answer. There is no update planned in 16.7. Whether that's in 16.8, 16.9, I'm not sure. But it's certainly not going to be in 16.7. Bill, masking was good before, now it's next level. Yeah, it is, and there's some tricks. There's some fun stuff with it. Right. So we have a subject here, hopefully an obvious subject. This could go wrong, couldn't it? Right. Subject mask, please deliver. Please. Yeah, there we go. Okay. There is my very big rock. We have a subject mask. Lovely. Maybe I want to change the sky, but ignore the subject, remove the subject from it. Okay. And also maybe remove this rock. So I just want to play with the sky. Right. Then in which case, let's create a radio. Still the same things. Don't fall for these tricks. Right, new layer. Let's just not do that one. Right, in my new layer, I'm going to create a basic sky mask. Other way, we're going to go there, and I'm just going to be really picky and sort of go to that line. Okay. I've now got a hardline mask. I could have done it with an AI brush, of course, but up to you. Now, there's two ways of removing this rock from my sky mask, and it's going to make it important later on when I move it to another image, but let's see. So number one, let's combine masks and say I'm going to subtract with an AI select. Create that mask. I'm going to choose my rock. Lovely. And now I'm going to combine and say subtract a subject. Create mask. Background may have worked in this, I'm not sure, but look. So there is my subject mask. It is subtracting, as well as the AI mask here, from my big bulky linear thing that I don't particularly want. And let's say on this layer, I'm going to pull back some exposure. Let's make it a bit moodier. So pull back some highlights, maybe make it cooler, add in some saturation, but certainly let's go to clarity and pull that up. We could also pull a bit of dehaze. Okay, so I've now got a layer, which is my sky without rocky thingy. And if I turn that off and on, done a good job, right? Let's copy the adjustments. Let's paste them into here. Now we've got a problem, right? Just as we always would do, because it's pasted in. And by the way, just to be very clear, you can save all of your stuff with your layers as a custom style. Just bear in mind things like AI subject choice, and it's giving you a little warning. Some things don't copy across to the style, but you can save and edit now with nested masks in your layer as a style and apply it to another image. That's quite exciting. But in this case here, so this would be a real nightmare in typical terms, but we don't actually have to, because our subject mask is actually still there. Because these are all editable, I can go to my adjustment layer for my linear gradient and I can just move it because it's editable. I haven't rasterized it. I don't have to start over again with that mask, which, believe me, is a big deal. As someone who has started over again and again many times with a mask. Let's just go to there. Okay, what about this AI select one, my subtraction? Well, it's taken that. So let's just clear that mask and now select where the rock is here. So I now have the same effect applied in both images with 3 clicks, and these have shifted. The subject mask has automatically moved between the two images. It got that itself. So you can imagine for people, this is really handy. The other bits, even though they didn't move automatically, they're really easy to move and change and edit, because all of these masks remain editable in their natural state. So a radial mask allows you to continue to change the parametrics of it, as does a linear mask. An AI brush, you can delete, you can add, whatever. This is where it gets really, really valuable, because moving from image to image used to be like, oh, we're starting again with the mask. I don't have to anymore. Right, here's a fun one for you. Linear masks. What do we not have in Capture One that's really frustrating? Here is a linear mask. And in true GND terms, right? So this is a gradient or graduated neutral density filter. So it's a graduated mask from solid to nothing up here. And I could do the reverse. So I could go like that. That's okay. But it's always been a pain, right? Because we couldn't do things like a center point linear gradient, and we couldn't do a reverse GND before. Well, now we can. So think about this. Think about the mindset. Let's just create a new layer just to do it really cleanly. So first off, I am going to draw a very straight mask that goes, actually, we're going to go maybe 2/3 up the image. I'm going to move it up to there. So no effect up here, 50% here, 100% there. Let me actually move that to there. I want a centered linear stripe, basically. So how would I do that previously? Well, I actually can't. In the previous way of doing it, the second I go to draw another gradient, oops, sorry, I delete the first. Useless. If I rasterize this gradient, so let's say here, rasterize it, And now I want to soften the bottom bit. How do I do it? Well, I'd have to, and you've seen me do it, guys. You'd have to go in here with your eraser and make it huge, really soft, and a low opacity, and you'd have to sort of do it by hand. Don't have to anymore. So here is my gradient. I'm going to draw it from here up. I wish to subtract from that gradient another gradient, a linear gradient, create the mask. By the way, you don't have to keep going to combine masks. You can right click and you can choose it here. I was just showing you with it because the image is icon to give you a bit of a giveaway. I'm going to move this back just for everyone's benefit so we see more picture. I'm going to do it the what will be faster way with a right click. So I've now added a new linear gradient, but that gradient is a subtract one, which means now when I draw from here up to here, I am creating a centered GND. And more importantly, one that is infinitely editable because I can go back to both layers and change them however I choose. And then, if I want to, I can go on here and say combine masks, or, as I say, right click. I can have an intersect and say, or subtract maybe, and say AI select. So I've now got an AI select area, and I'm going to subtract from my mask the city. But most importantly, this is the key bit, most importantly, forget the operation, most importantly, I can now, with my linear gradient, go back to it and say, no, I want a softer fall off still. Or up in the sky, no, I want a hard line, actually, down there. These are still editable. Everything is editable. So you haven't lost the ability to edit things having combined them. As I say, most of what we can do with intersecting masks could have been done manually. But my God, this is a lot easier, right? Right, not a person, it's an elephant. Obviously, it's an elephant. Don't have to teach you that. Right, layer. Let's create, I want to darken the area of grass, but I don't want the elephant to darken. So if I select a background layer, that's great, but it's now got the sky. Didn't want that. Ugh. And actually, I wanted the darkness to start here, and I wanted to get lighter back there. Or maybe I want the reverse, actually. Darken up here and lighter back there. Well, I could remove the sky. I could do some Luma Range stuff, but I don't have to do any of that now. Let's remove the background layer. Let's remove this layer. Brand new layer. Gradient. Click here. There is my darkness. There is my darkness. Sounds very, very foreboding. Right. But I don't want this stuff in the background included. And maybe I don't even want the trees included quite so much either. That's a problem. Well, it's not really, because I can right click and say subtract, maybe an AI select, or I could go for a Luma range. So let's go for a Luma range and say I want to subtract all of the dark stuff. Although weirdly, I'm not getting what I expected. That's annoying me. Instead, we're going to do it a different way. We're going to subtract a AI select and say none of that, please. And we can be specific. We can play with this a lot more if you choose and whatever. But you get the idea. But I've got a bigger problem, right? Because forget the sky. That bit we can clean up and we can remove, and we can actually even do it by color range. It doesn't really matter. But if I'm going to do this in a way that darkens, just get rid of the airbrush out of it, darkens this bit here and lightens this bit here, I don't want the elephant included. Right click, subtract, subject. And actually, if I'm being really lazy with this stuff, let's just create a new, in fact, right click, subtract. Let's go for a linear gradient. And I can just draw that line, down here. And because it's editable, it doesn't matter if I get it wrong. because I can edit it. So I've now got 3 things controlling what goes on, which means that now when I go to my adjustment layer, which is darken floor, and pull down the exposure, I get the exact effect that I wanted. The exact effect. I wanted the background to get darker, the foreground to stay lighter, the elephant to be left alone, and the sky to not be affected. That can be done manually, as we say. But the key part is that if I don't like the fall off, if this is too harsh or not harsh enough, I can still edit my linear gradient. Not that one, sorry. This one here. I can have it a harder fall off. I can have it a softer fall off. I could have the darkness, not appear so much at all in the background. These are all completely editable, and I can play with them. So I could, for example, play with, actually let's lower, quite an often used thing, let's lower the contrast in there. Let's pull down that exposure and so on. Remember the changes you're making, the adjustments you're making are about the layer. Please don't fall into the trap of thinking that you're making adjustments to each mask. That wouldn't make logical sense. You're making adjustments to the layer, which is why we name the layer. We don't rename these. These are actually just stuck as what they are, as masks. This is still your adjustment. This is still all the changes you're making. But you're choosing what to make them to based on all of the submasks, which you can choose to add, subtract, intersect. Luma range is an intersect mask, as we've covered. Isn't that cool? I mean, it was just covered that in sort of 40 minutes. It's quite a bit of a whirlwind for it, but please play with these, because, and actually it's interesting. Also, what's interesting, just for everyone's benefit, I remember this distinctly not being level. So it's not that I'm off, but that does. Oh no, now the trees are leaning. Oh well, it does feel weird when it's not level, but. Yes. Joe, does refine mask become obsolete? No, it does not. So, for example, my subject mask here, if I were to go into here and I want, bear in mind it's a subtract mask, I can still refine it, and you'll see that it spreads. Remember, it's an inverse because it's the subtracted mask, not the additive mask. But refine still exists, and it still does what it's supposed to do, i.e., spread to common similar pixels or areas. So refine still very much there. And also, please don't forget, you do not have to constantly combine masks. You don't have to add every single mask as a combined thing. I know we're going to do it. There's the honeymoon period where everyone has 16 layers, with 300 masks on each of them. Let's not do that. Let's skip through that stage if we can. But you can still obviously use Capture One as if it were last version, or current version, actually. Key thing, current version. But yeah, you can move on to the new stuff if you need to. And there will be certain situations where this makes sense to do, and certain situations where it's easier to do it the old way. Fine. Gary, will Capture One be producing a detailed video explaining all these new features? Well, number one, I just have. But actually, no, not in the sense that it works for the wider audience. This will work for people that shoot like me. There are a load of scenarios with people, with studios, with portraits and stuff like that. If you have a look at the Capture One channel, you will see that there are two sessions on, I can't remember the date, but it's the end of October. David Grover is running through all the different scenarios and showing people how to do masks, and actually more complex than these for sure, and some of the little quirks and tweaks and whatever. So please, do log into that. But there's a YouTube session. It's next week sometime. Anyway, have a look. Capture One's channel. Have a look. You'll find it. There we go. Exciting, right? Brenton, October 30th. There we go. So yeah, watch that, Gary. Quite exciting though. I like that. There's some new news to talk about. Right, let's go back in time. Let's put our 16.6 hat on. So we'll forget that this button exists for a second and look at Paul's shot of a pier. And this one here, there's some questions that Paul had about, funnily enough, noise up here. And overall, does the edit work? We'll cover that in a second. And secondly, the shadow of the pier, and we'll cover that in a second too. One question: does Capture One now allow you to de-squeeze anamorphic lenses? The aspect ratio in Capture One was increased from memory. You can go much greater, but I don't know whether it goes quite the extent that you need. So to de-squeeze, I'm not sure what that ratio is. I don't know what 100 is in equivalent terms, but I would run it through that aspect ratio there, see what you can get out of it, see if you can pull it. I'm not entirely sure whether it will work for what you need. Right, so two questions. Number one, noise up in the sky. One thing I would say, Paul, so here, when I'm zoomed out, and I don't know whether you'll see it on YouTube, I can see noise. Please don't work with noise zoomed out. Always look at noise at 100%. And at 100%, you're pretty noise free. You're ISO 100. You've added some clarity into the sky. Clarity and structure can hurt the sky, and especially noise. But here, it's not too bad. It's just when you zoom out, I think you're seeing some artifacts which aren't actually really there. There's a preview issue, maybe. Second question you had was about the pier, and more importantly, the shadow underneath. So in this case here, you're lifting exposure, you're lifting contrast, and you're lifting shadow of the pier. I would suggest, and I think you've already done it looking at, because I can see some brush marks there effectively. In my experience, reflections, shadows, and everything on water tend to be less of an impact than the original. In other words, you don't need to push it as much. And the problem with pushing it that much is you will get a little bit of noise coming out in there because you're lifting it from the shadows. So I would suggest, in this case here, just using a simple brush. In fact, we can go into our grayscale, simple brush, low opacity, and just do, simple eraser. Got mask head on. Right, a low opacity, and just do a few strokes just to soften the impact of that lifting down below. You don't need to lift it as much as you lift the subject. It would still be relatively shadowed. What I'm not a fan of in here is this yellowy greeny sort of tone in here. And I think, to be honest, it's a simple one, which is just go to your global adjustments. You've got a global one across everything so press M for your mask to see that. You've got a brightness lift in there. Let's just check there's nothing in here, nothing in advanced. I would be tempted to go into the basics and pull down saturation on the yellows, and also pull down some saturation on the greens, and maybe go up here into your tint and just offset it a little bit. Maybe that's too much, maybe to there, just to remove the greeniness from it. That's it. The rest of it, in my opinion, it's a little bit HDR'd. It feels a little bit HDR'd. We want a bit more contrast than that. So this brightness here is not particularly helping you. If I lift up contrast, it's going to make the dark bits darker, but it also lifts the light bits. If anything, you could play with a curve just to do that lift. But I know we pay a lot of money on our lenses to not do it, but I would actually put in a bit more of a vignette in there to give me a feel of looking out. These values down here are pretty low. I mean, there's 6 in the shadow down there. So maybe you go into the black slider here and just pull them up a touch. We don't want to affect the other shadows, just a touch. That lifts them to 10, so they're still going to print with some detail in them. But I'd sort of get to there. I'm not a fan of it being too saturated, so maybe we go down to there. And that's it. So reduce the amount you're lifting the shadow, leave that as a shadow, keep the contrast, keep the difference, and with noise, just be really careful. Don't look at it out at whatever that fit zoom is. Look at it at 100% and you'll see that it's clean. That's it. Okay, where are we, Fabrizio? This one, we're going to do some quick edits on this one this week. So this one here, I like this shot. Shot works nicely. There's only one thing that's really distracting for me, which is when I see that, so this is out of focus, this branch behind, and unfortunately it makes it look like you've got a blur on the animal. So I would be in a place where I know it's changing nature, we don't like changing nature, but I would be adding a healing brush, so Q on the keyboard or go to the healing brush layer, and I would choose my origin, and I would just brush that branch because I don't want the eye to think that it's part of the animal. I don't like where that's taken this branch from, so because I chose the origin, I'm going to move that origin maybe to there to find basically a nice clean bit there. Now, to me, that looks like he's got almost like a double, it's almost like a double exposure. This here, a bit cleaner. Yes, that up there is a little bit messy, so we can always go to a clone tool. We can choose our origin, put a low opacity because you want to do it a little bit, oops, sorry, a little bit subtle. Let's just do that, just to blend it in so we don't see that green triangle. And that's it. Now, what we could do as a bit more fun, I don't think you need all that space. And part of me is in a place of, if we went to maybe a 4x3 and vertical, does that make it a little bit more interesting? Because actually I'm in a place of maybe even you straighten up the trunk a little bit. Not completely. So that's where we are at. That would be completely. Let's go halfway. Because he's leaning. But to me, maybe that looks just a bit more involved, a bit more engaging. Add in some contrast. Add in a bit of clarity. Put in a bit of dehaze and put in a nice little vignette. And I get from there with this shadow to there without it. But then I get to there. And I, personal preference, obviously, I'm going to back away that contrast, pull up some lightness. Maybe pull down a little bit of saturation actually as well. But to me, between those two, this one just feels a lot more tight and involved than this one that just feels a bit more observant, as it were. So again, personal preference where I'm at. You'll notice I haven't used any combined masks. We've done enough of that now. But please, for those of you on the beta, go and play with them. Play with the scenarios that be useful for you. Those of you that aren't, maybe consider having a play. Georges sent me an email. Finally, I now know how to pronounce his name. So it's Georges. So this one here, how do we make it more active? This, interestingly, there is someone, I don't think they're watching today, but someone I know that's got a very good tracking shot because I was there when he took it. But we'll see if that comes in. How do we make this more dynamic, more exciting? Probably through a little bit of movement with it, so of tonality change. So number one, we've got our car in there, which means number two, we've got non-car. Very handy. We could, of course, I can spend ages doing the combination of layers here. We're not going to. It's just going to go annoy you. So please go and play with it yourselves. But this is a perfect example of where you, if you wanted to add the car and the foreground, for example, with a in fact, let's do it. So car and foreground. Let's create add. So I've got nothing in there at the moment. So I'm going to add a subject mask, and it's going to say, there's my car. Okay. But I don't want the background through the car. So I'm going to say subtract the AI select. I'm going to take that out. Actually, that's good. I'm actually okay with that, even with them included. And then I'm going to add a linear gradient. Because I want to sort of lighten this, but also add, the wrong way around, some lightness to the foreground too, that fades off into the background. Good. So you can see now my mask in grayscale. We've got the car being fully affected down here, fully affected, and it's slowly going away. And then all I'm going to do is actually pull down a bit of saturation and pull up some brightness. So we're pulling the focus towards the foreground, if you see what I mean. So it goes from there to there. Now, I'm not saying that's the right thing, but that's how we can combine the layers. Otherwise, I would actually be in a place on this one, and I'm going to do it the old school way without tinkering too much. Let's create a, oops, sorry, I'm in the non-car layer. Oops. Let's create a new mask. There, a nice radial, and we're going to pull down our exposure, but also pull down saturation because exposure has a habit of pushing that. And we're going to create a new layer again. So this is foreground. This is background. Oop. And we're going to create a new linear mask on our background up there, which is lower on our exposure, but increase in saturation. Good. And on my non-car layer, I'm going to go into clarity and pull it down. So that's the key part in this. Yes, I've played with color and tone, but look at this difference from there to there, there to there. It's already blurry, but that negative clarity really blurs it, really gives us a huge amount of oomph, as it were. And then I can just punch a little bit more of a vignette. So it goes from there to there. Does that make it feel faster? That can only be your call. But overall, I'd actually be in a place as well where we pull down a touch of saturation. It just feels a little bit too saturated and contrasty. But there to there, does this one feel faster? It's up to you. It certainly looks it because of the blurriness. But yeah, your call. Right, ladies and gentlemen, isn't that fun? Something new to talk about. With the new layers of masking functionality, it'll be as we used to do it in the old days. All over. Yes, you're right, Paula. And actually, the key thing is just remember what I said at the very beginning. You've been doing intersecting masks the whole time with Luma ranges. You just haven't thought about it. Now you think about that, the intersecting mask doesn't have to be a Luma range. It could be a subject mask, it could be an AI brush, it could be a linear mask, it could be a radial mask. Up to you. You have complete control now over what intersects, what adds, and what subtracts from your mask for a layer. Remember, your adjustments are on the layer, not on the mask. And then equally, you notice we've done a lot of these without any use of the new tools. So the old stuff's still good. So George's car, Fabrizio's, what is it? Is it an onyx? Is it a deer? Is it an antelope? It's a thing. Yep. But just be careful with that double thing there. It's just a little bit distracting, and I would personally go almost there. Paul's pier, just back some stuff away, maybe reduce some of the saturation. But hopefully this little set has shown you where we're at, what is coming. You no longer have to do global adjustments. You no longer have to go, whack up the black, pull down the highlight and whatever. We can do some really clever stuff with masks, but it's for your view to play and have some fun with it. So there we go. Right. For those of you that are not going to play with the beta, carry on as you were. Send in some images so you can carry on doing it through there. You've still got time to upload your images into this month's competition, so isn't that fun? There's still the masterclass that we did on architecture and perspective, and actually for that matter all the other masterclasses. You'll find the link in this video. But in the meantime, as we said, carry on chatting away on Facebook. I now need to go and pack some more boxes, and we will see you next time we're on. Cheers everyone, bye bye.